Xenoblade Chronicles X came out in 2015, between Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2. Its ending left the story on a massive cliffhanger until the definitive edition came out in 2025 and added Chapter 13, so here's a chronological summary of the definitive edition, including the newly added Chapter 13. So a long time ago, humanity's ancestors, the Cimmerians, existed. They were good with technology and whatnot and created other races to serve them. Within these creations, they implanted a failsafe to destroy them in case they ever turned against their creators, which was the Cimmerians' own DNA. One of these created races was known as the Ganglion, and one of the Cimmerian scientists that created them was called Void. He did experiments on the Conduit, an infinite energy source, and used it to create the Ares, a robot suit powered by these cores. However, the creation of the Ares summons the ghosts into the universe, which are supposedly the universe's own corrective system, and they start destroying things. In response, the rest of the Cimmerians destroy the Ares Prime and eternally confine Void's mind in the Volaterras in the Rift Between Worlds forever. A lot of time passes and the ancient Cimmerians have essentially disappeared and have descended into the peace-loving race of current Cimmerians and humans over on Earth. These modern-day Cimmerians found records of the Ares Prime and were able to recreate it. Within Void's prison, a fissure formed and his mind was able to escape into the Vita, a robot body created by his Ganglion worshippers. These bigger robot bodies are known as Skells, and the Vita is one of the strongest of them all. Void rallies the Ganglion and attacks the current Cimmerian homeworld. Void hoping to reclaim the Ares and the Ganglion hoping to wipe out the DNA that can be used to destroy them. The modern day Cimmerians are able to fend off the attack well enough, but since the Ares is back in play, the ghosts reappear and start destroying everything. With the planet's fate sealed, the Cimmerians send one of their own to Earth to warn the humans of the incoming threat of the Ganglion and the ghosts. Elma escapes the planet's destruction with the Ares and makes it all the way to Earth. Elma arrives sometime in the mid-2020s and helps put a plan in place to save humanity from extinction. With Elma's new advanced knowledge, humanity rapidly develops as they begin the Earth-Life colonization project. The ECP make a plan to relocate people from major cities to a new planet and hope to repopulate after the relocation. In order to save as many people as possible, the leaders of the project opt to preserve mankind's different minds inside a supercomputer instead of transporting their actual bodies. These supercomputers contain the consciousness of up to 20 million humans and are called lifeholds. They're placed on arc ships that are large enough to contain entire cities within them. After finding a new place to live, people's bodies would be recreated and their minds would be transferred in. But the leaders of the project told the survivors that their actual bodies are in the lifehold and not just their data. In the meantime, humans aboard the arc ships will control a robot body known as a mimeosome. At some point during all this, Elma develops a bond with the pilot named Al, and he takes over as pilot of the Ares. Eventually, in 2054, the Ghosts and the Ganglion start a battle above Earth space. Most of the Ark ships are shot down as they try to escape the planet, but the American ship, the White Whale, escapes before the planet is blown up. Unbeknownst to humanity, the bright light that destroyed the Earth actually destroyed the entire universe and pushes the White Whale and the Ganglion into a new dimension containing the planet Mira. Following the explosion, Void's consciousness fades from the Vita and it crashes into planet Mira. The White Whale drifts through space for about 2 years before they're attacked by the Ghosts again. Al fights off the Ghosts using the Ares until the Ares and the Ghosts both disappear in another flash of light. Al finds himself and the Ares transported into a rift between dimensions where he can perceive other universes, and he's going to stay there for a bit. The ship is heavily damaged during the attack and it crash lands on Mira, scattering the lifehold and the pods containing all of the mimeosomes across the planet. The city within the White Whale is intact enough and becomes humanity's new base of operations known as New Los Angeles. The captain of the White Whale, Nagi, chief engineer Vandahm, and a politician named Maurice agreed to establish a new autonomous government and create the organization Blade, whose primary goal is to recover the lifeholds across the planet, recover refugees, and defend their new city. About 2 months after the crash, we get to the beginning of the game. On a retrieval mission, Elma discovers the player character's life pod. The character player has amnesia and doesn't remember much of anything. You can actually name the player in the game, but we're going to call him Cross. Elma and Cross make their way back to New LA and fight off a couple of monsters. Back in New LA, Elma and Cross meet Irina and Gwin, Elma's former subordinates from back on Earth. They talk for a little bit, then Elma and Cross see a smoking Skell flying around before crashing nearby. A young girl, Lynn, arrives to assess the crash. The pilot Doug emerges from the Skell and Lynn tells Doug to put the damaged Skell away. Then she joins Elma and Cross on their way to Blade headquarters. Cross gets a quick overview of the city and the group is greeted by Secretary Nagi, who explains Blade's purpose to Cross. Then after thinking it over for for a little bit, Cross joins Blade. Elma and Lynn take Cross on their first mission to place a data probe to gather more information about the surrounding area. When they return, they meet Commander Vandahm, and then Cross joins a Blade division. Vandahm reports that a Skell pilot has gone missing and appoints Elma, Cross, and Lynn to investigate. Upon arrival to the site, they find the broken down Skell, but no signs of the pilots. Lynn receives a distress signal from a nearby structure before they are attacked by alien lifeforms, the Prone, part of the Ganglion Alliance. Elma tries to negotiate, but the Prone refuse and attack. The party survives and makes their way to a structure and finds the Skell team dead inside. Elma tries to explain humanity's plight to the leader of the Prone, but is unsuccessful in the group's fight. Elma's group leaves the base and finds a Napon Tatsu in a nearby crate, and then he joins the group. Vandahm reports that a new lifehold has been found. The group heads on over and meets Lau, who's on a separate mission to deploy a data probe. As the party leaves, Lau offers to join the party and the group heads towards the target lifehold. Along the way, they meet another alien being, El, a mira merchant who insists on aiding the party. The group arrives at the lifehold and find the Prone already attacking it. They start a fight, but the lifehold pod blows up. Goetia appears and tells the group that she belongs to the Ganglion and says it's their duty to destroy all humans. They fight. Goetia loses but retreats when a mech aids her escape. Elma recognizes it and confirms that the mech was among the types seen fighting above Earth. Upon return to New Los Angeles, they all discuss that the lifehold pod destroyed was not the core, but one of 3 large archives. Tatsu and El confirm that the Ganglion are not native to Mira, and the group realizes that they followed them to Mira and are targeting the lifeholds. Gwin and Irina show up to request Elma's group's help. They had a mission lined up when Vandahm requested that they investigate a spacecraft that fell onto the planet. Elma and Cross's group takes over Vandam's mission and head to the crash site. They meet the Manon, who have also had issues with the Ganglion. Elma's group destroys 3 machines to gain the Manon's trust. When they report back, they find them being attacked by Ganglion Skells. There's a little skirmish and the Ganglion are defeated. However, at the end, one Skell fires a shot at Tatsu and Cross rushes in to protect him. Cross's left arm is blown off and reveals robotic bits underneath. Elma realizes that Cross doesn't know about mimiosomes and shuts him down. Lynn performs some emergency care and the group transports him back to New LA where Cross is fully repaired. Elma reveals to Cross that all of the humans in New LA are mimiosomes and being controlled by individuals' minds within the lifehold. However, the lifehold's power supply is limited and running out of power. If the lifehold runs out of power before it can be reconnected to a new power source, all of the mimiosomes will shut down. The Manon are introduced to Vandahm, Nagi, and Maurice, and they're allowed to stay in the city. Remember the Vita? It crash landed on planet Mira and is surrounded by wild monsters. These monsters are tainted and will attack any living thing that tries to get close. Luxaar, the Ganglion leader, says that within the Vita lies a clue to their great one, Void, and retrieving it will allow them to escape Mira. Lau reports info about the Vita to Elma's group, thinking that the mimiosomes might not be attacked by the tainted monsters since they technically aren't living. The group opts to try and retrieve the Vita. Lau and Elma's group are able to approach the Vita without being attacked. However, Tatsu shows up with the extraction squad, aggroing the tainted in the area, so a fight takes place. The group barely survives until a different monster, a Telethia, attacks the tainted monsters and then flies away. Back at the Ganglion stronghold, Luxaar orders a Rothian man, Gajarg, to retrieve the Vita under threat of extinction for all the Rothian people. Vandahm sends Elma's group to rendezvous with Irina's team, who have found a piece of the lifehold near a Ganglion base. Elma's group fights off the Ganglion while Irina's team reaches the lifehold, but it turns out to be a trap. Goetia, piloting a Skell, blows up the piece of the lifehold. Irina questions why they want to destroy humanity, and Goetia tells them that it's out of fear. The group fights and defeats Goetia. Then she blows up. A large Ganglion assault force attacks the city, and Blade moves to defend New LA. Fights ensue around the city. Vandahm orders all units on standby to mobilize, and Lau orders his team to leave their position guarding the Vita and get involved. Elma's team meets a new pair of Ganglion leaders, Riz and Dagam. They fight, and Elma opts to leave Riz alive for more information, but their conversation is interrupted by Gajarg stealing the Vita. Riz leaves, and Elma's teams rendezvous with Irina's. Elma meets up with Lau, who blames himself for leaving the Vita, but Elma wonders how the Ganglion even knew where the Vita was in the first place, suspecting Lau of being a spy. A new piece of the lifehold is found, and Vandahm sends Lau and Elma to retrieve it. When Elma's team arrives at the site, they find Lau already wounded and alone. Elma's team continues, but doesn't find anything at the lifehold coordinates. They're ambushed by Gajarg, and Elma asks why they work for the Ganglion. Gwin explains that the Ganglion stole their home, forcing the Prince Gajarg to work for them, out of fear that they would wipe out their people. Choosing pride over working for the Ganglion, Gajarg agrees to a battle and promises Elma's group their freedom if they win, which they do. He reveals the Ganglion stronghold location and tells the group that their living bodies can destroy the Ganglion. Back in New LA, Doug talks to Lau a bit, and then Elma lets Doug know her suspicions that Lau is a spy. Vandahm gives Lynn an assignment to repair a data probe to the north. Meanwhile, Riz and Dagan take a gigantic mech to attack the humans, displeasing Luxaar in the process. When Lynn arrives at the data probe, she sees the massive mech, and Elma says that it needs to be stopped. The group fights it, it explodes, and Dagan and Riz die. Elma receives an urgent call from Vandahm. They find Lau trying to steal a Skell known as the Prog Ares. Lau says that Elma should have let him die since she knew he was a spy. Lau has also stolen the data on the lifehold core's location and all of the backup data. The group tries to stop him, but he escapes. Vandahm explains that the power to the lifehold would run out in the time that it would take to reprocess all of the data with the lifehold's location, meaning that Elma's group needs to get the data back from Lau. They find Lau, who's mad at the government because when they learned of humanity's destruction, only the rich and connected were chosen to survive. Despite his own military contributions, his wife and daughter were not chosen to survive, so he's mad about that. Elma says that even if she didn't agree with how the survivors were chosen, it was still better than total extinction for humanity. The group fights and ultimately Lau is defeated. He dares Elma to shoot him and risk destroying the data, but Lin and Cross intervene. Lin says she understands Lau's anger and talks to him. Lau changes his mind about withholding the data and gives it to Lin. The group returns to New LA. Maurice announces that the lifehold has been found. Nagi deploys every Blade member to participate in the mission to reclaim it. When they arrive, they see the Ganglion are already there and are attempting to destroy the core, but it has a barrier in place. Elma, Lin, Cross, Elle, Tatsu, Irina, Gwin, and Doug enter the core. Meanwhile, Luxaar decides to attack with the Vita. As Elma's team explores the core, she starts to explain that the human bodies aren't actually in the core, but Luxaar breaks in and attacks, and despite using the Vita, Elma's group defeats Luxaar. Elma goes back to her explanation that everybody's actual bodies were destroyed when the Earth was blown up. Mid-explanation, Luxaar shoots an energy ball at the lifehold controls, triggering a self-defense measure within the lifehold that generates chimeras that attack the group. From above, Lau, who snuck in on his own, stabs Luxaar from behind. The two fall into the lifehold goo. The human DNA inside of it causes Luxaar to disintegrate. Lau is turned into a chimera and emerges from the goo and starts attacking. Once defeated, Lau regains some control and reveals to the group that the Ganglion were created by the Samarians and that the failsafe to destroy them was in fact their DNA. After explaining all that to everybody, Lau's body disintegrates. Elma reveals that within the lifehold there is actually one real body held in stasis, her own. Her mimeosome deactivates and the real Elma emerges from a pod. Using her actual body, Elma activates the lifehold's backup power supply. After the credits roll, Elma and a group of Blades break into the lifehold core's data chamber and discover that it is completely destroyed the entire time, causing them to wonder how anybody is alive since that is where the data on everybody's minds was held. At some point after the Vita fell into the goo in the lifehold chamber, Void retakes control of it. Al and the Ares Prime escape from the rift between dimensions and enter Mira. Vandahm reports that dematerialization events are happening and sends Elma's group to investigate. They get to the location of an event and ghosts emerge and attack some nearby Blade members. Elma's group is about to be erased, but Al saves him with the Ares Prime before he's chased off by the Vita. Elma gives her backstory to everybody back at Blade headquarters before they locate the Ares Prime and head out. Elma's group witnesses the Vita steal the Ares Prime's power cores. They fight the Vita for a bit before the ghosts show up and chase the Vita away. Al emerges from the Ares and apologizes for losing the cores. Everyone in the group is surprised to see that Al is still alive. They bring him and the Ares back to New LA. Elma gives some lore about the ghost and she and Al reminisce about their past. Following Al's medical checkup, it's revealed that Al is not a mimeosome since a living body is required to pilot the Ares. Suddenly, the Voltaris appears alongside the Vita and Void broadcasts a message to everyone, rallying the remaining Ganglion and declares a contest for survival to Elma's group. Elma says that regardless of what they do, the planet Mira will be destroyed. Al says that their survival plan is to escape Mira entirely, but that they'll need the Ares cores back to do so. After analyzing the Ares, Lin reveals to everybody that they are in a separate dimension from their original planet and that their original dimension has already been destroyed. The group decides to evacuate Mira using the man-on ship, and the engineers work on a way to hook up the Ares Prime to the ship to power their escape. Al explains to the group that when he was trapped in the rift between dimensions, he caught glimpses of several different universes. Al speculates that Void's consciousness was also trapped in that rift and that when Ares escaped to Mira, Void was able to follow it. Elma's group goes to track down a man-on engineer that encountered some Ganglion while looking for a missing part to help power the escape. On arrival, they find Gwin, who lets them know that the Rothians have accepted the escape plan. They fight off some Ganglion together, and Gajarg helps confirm Al's theories that Void's body is trapped in the rift and only his mind is in the Vita. On the way back to New LA, Al mentions that he saw Lau while drifting in the rift and that he had well wishes for Lin. Elma receives a transmission for help from the man-on engineer. Upon arrival, they find Void has killed the engineer and their escorts. Void explains that he wishes to understand death and then flies off. Elma's group retrieves the missing part and heads back to New LA. Lin wonders why Void hasn't just left Mira on his own. Al explains that while he was in the rift, his mind became bonded to the Ares and that only he and the Ares can use the full power of the cores. Al also explains that he felt humanity's consciousness in the rift and that is how they've all survived despite the lifehold core being destroyed. The dematerialization events cover most of Mira. The White Whale 2 is ready to go and it just needs everybody to board. The White Whale 2 enters the Voltaris and Elma leads a raiding party to Void. The group defeats Void and Al approaches to reclaim the cores, but Void absorbs Al and the Ares, obtaining a new form. Elma's group fights again and Al and the Ares re-emerge with the cores. Al climbs out of the Ares and collapses but is helped by Cross. Al puts Cross in the Ares pilot seat next to him and the ghost of Lao shows up and Void is defeated. Al explains that Void is experiencing death as he fades away. The Volataris starts to crumble and Elma's group heads back to the White Whale too. They fought off Ghost as Al docks the Ares into the White Whale and it makes its jump to escape the dimension. Al gives Void's backstory to the group and the White Whale reaches the end of its escape, approaching a blue planet with a ring around it. Anyway, that's the main story for Xenoblade Chronicles X and the new Chapter 13. Thanks for making it to the end of the video, and leave a comment and or like for the YouTube algorithm.